Now, moving on to proportions. So, proportions usually you are referring to the ratios that are equal, and in most cases, you need to solve for one missing item. And then we will practice this as well. For instance, if you have these two guys in an election competing for elections, Damon getting 3 votes for every 2 votes that Shannon gets, what will be the proportion if Damon gets 72 votes? How many votes will Shannon get? So it is given in a statement like that, but it usually refers to two ratios. Remember, we said ratios, you can present them in fraction format. The way to solve it is you think of what number do you multiply this one to get to 72? It is 24. So whatever you do in maths terms on one at the top, you also do it at the bottom. So multiplying 3 by 24, you get 72. That's how they got there. Then you do the same at the bottom. 2 by 24, it's 48. So if Damon gets 72, Shannon will get 48. So you have solved for N, the missing item, the missing term. N is 48. So Shannon gets 48 votes. Let's look at another example. If tires cost 2 for 72 rand, how many will 4 tires cost? Can you put this in a fraction format so you can work out this proportion? So this one, the statement says 2 tires, the cost of 2 tires is 72 rand. So 2 tires for 75 rand. So my bad, not 72, 75. 2 tires cost 75. You put that in a fraction. Then how much will 4 tires, for the cost? We have a missing item. Similarly, what happens to get from 2 to 4? You multiply by 2. You do the same aim at the bottom, and then you get 150. So the cost of 4 tires will be 150 rand. You have solved for N. This is a different way of solving the proportions. We've seen the one where you figure out what number you multiplied this to get to there, and then you would do the same at the bottom. Another way is to use cross multiply. Cross multiply meaning you will say 2 multiplied by N, which would be 2 multiplied by N there, and then similarly 8 multiplied by 6, or 6 multiplied by 8, which would be that one there. Then what you do is 2 multiplied by N is the same thing as just saying 2N. And then 6 multiplied by 8 is 48. Then here in maths terms again, you know to work out what is on one side of the equal sign. You have to do the same to the other side. In that, to solve for N, you need to divide by 2 this side and then divide by 2 that side. In that way, when you divide by 2 this side, you are just left with what you need, which is N. So 2 divided by 2, leaving you with N, and then 248 divided by 2, the answer will be 24. You can use the previous method to test it out. Yet another example. 3 cans of soup cost 5 rand. How much will 12 cans cost? Again, the same as the previous one, but this time you can use the cross multiply, or whichever you find comfortable. Then 12 cans will cost you 20 bucks. Easy. These statements that are to follow, again, it will be a where you guys need to do a guesswork to see if you understand ratios in relation to proportions and fractions. So, uh, with the pauses in between, 2 out of 5 is that a ratio, proportion, or fraction? It's a proportion. 4 to every 10 is that a ratio, proportion, or fraction? I'm taking pauses so you can say it to yourself as you're listening to this. It is a ratio. Similarly, 10 to every 4, what is that? A ratio. 4 to 10, written in this format, what is that? A ratio. 4/10, what would that be? Means 4 divided by 10, or 4 over 10, which is a fraction. 4 out of 10 is a proportion. That should be straightforward as a fraction. And wait for it. 2/5, meaning 2 over 5. That is a fraction. Continuing with that exercise, if you have 3 lion fans to every 2 province fans, what would that be? A ratio. 3 boys out of 10 use deodorant. That is a proportion. 9 girls out of 10 use soap. That is a proportion. 1/3 of all road accidents involve drinking. That statement is a fraction. Half of all girls in SA love history. Fraction. 3 out of 4 pizza lovers love olives. Proportion. 3 out of 4 drivers speed at some point. Proportion again. 3/4 of drivers speed. Fraction. 3 drivers speed to every 1 which does not. Ratio. Cool. So we're done with that part and almost with the lesson. So you have seen a few examples of ratios and proportions in maths format, because you need to be able to calculate this as a designer and working on your items. But do you see the relevance to it as a designer, or do you see the relevance of these things to you as a designer? And you should. For instance, because when we talk about proportions, we refer to the size relationships that can be found within an object. It can also be used to explain the relationship of parts to each other, or parts to the whole. What that means in design terms, and what you guys have to understand this as, is that if you look at this floor lamps, are the bases in the right proportion with the shades? So that's something that you have to think about, look at it and see, and then this will be the eye of your client who is there to buy items for their home, or items for whatever, and then they have to look at it and they have to say to themselves, this doesn't look proportionate at all. It looks wrong, poorly designed, and all that. So try and figure that out and answer this question. That is the relevance of proportions to you guys as designers. And there are many, many, many more examples that you can use which apply to you guys as designers. Here's another one. So scale, if you want to relate it to proportion, it refers to how the size of an object relates to maybe the human being. And this is the example that they use in interior design a lot, referring to how the size of an object relates to human beings, because you need to look at this and then look at the setup in your home and see if things are proportionate, are in proportion, or you can even relate to other objects and spaces in your home as a designer. So looking at it, looking at this three images here, again, try and think about this. Which lamp is the best scale for this end table? So like I said, there are many examples that you can use. I just picked a few. So this is how, or this is why this topic is relevant to you guys as designers. So please try and understand it in that light. All right, that brings us to the end of this presentation. Hopefully you guys find it useful, and it brings us to the end and a brief or a worksheet. Cheers, guys.